The range smelled of dust and old metal, the kind of place where sound carried farther than it should. Sunlight cut through the open sides in pale strips, settling on wooden benches scarred by years of use. Targets stood at a distance, white circles punctured and repainted so many times they looked tired. This was not a glamorous place. It was honest, and it remembered every mistake. They were already there when she arrived. A small group, relaxed, confident, too confident. Their rifles were modern, clean, fitted with scopes that gleamed under the light. They talked loudly, laughed easily, the kind of laughter that came from never expecting to be challenged. When she walked in, conversation dipped for a moment, then resumed with a different tone. Curious, then amused. She carried her rifle wrapped in a faded cloth. The fabric had once been olive green, now it was closer to gray. She moved without hurry, shoulders straight, eyes forward. No headphones, no show, just quiet intent. When she laid the rifle on the bench and unwrapped it, the laughter sharpened. The metal was dark with age. Scratches crossed the stock like old scars. The bolt handle was smooth from use long before any of them were born. It was unmistakably old, a World War II rifle, carried through a time when people learned to shoot not for sport, but for survival. Someone whistled. Another chuckled. A third shook his head. Is that thing even safe? One of them said. She didn't look up. Another voice followed, louder, playful. Sweetheart, you know they've invented new rifles since then, right? She adjusted the sling with careful fingers. The leather creaked softly, as if remembering hands that had once depended on it. Hey, someone added, grinning now, you'll miss. That line landed differently. Not cruel, not angry, just dismissive, the kind that assumed the ending before the story had even begun. She paused. For a moment, the range noise seemed to fall away. She rested her hand on the rifle stock, feeling the grain beneath her palm. It grounded her. The weight was familiar, not just physical, but emotional. This rifle had taught her patience. It had punished sloppy breathing. It had never forgiven arrogance. She finally looked up, not at them, at the target. Downrange, the bullseye waited. Still, silent, unimpressed. She took her place behind the bench, posture relaxed but precise. No wasted movement. Anyone who truly knew shooting would have noticed it then. Not the rifle, not the age, but the way she stood. Balanced, centered, like someone who understood that accuracy began long before the trigger. The group kept watching. One of them leaned toward another. This should be good. She ignored them. As she opened the bolt, the sound was solid, mechanical, honest. No electronics, no assist, just steel and discipline. She checked the chamber, slow and deliberate, then closed it again. The click echoed softly. Her breathing changed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Not taught, remembered. Her mind drifted, not to the crowd, not to the mockery, but to earlier days. Early mornings, cold air, targets that didn't forgive hesitation. A voice, calm but firm, once telling her that respect for the weapon mattered more than confidence. She lifted the rifle. The weight settled into her shoulder like it belonged there. The old iron sights framed the distant circle. No magnification, no digital help, just alignment and trust. The laughter faded, not because she demanded silence, but because something about her stillness drew it out of them. Even they could feel it now. The moment before something irreversible. Someone muttered, "She's serious." She exhaled halfway and held. Time stretched. The bullseye waited, and in that suspended second, before the shot, before the outcome, one truth hung quietly in the air. They had already underestimated her. And the rifle had been waiting for this moment far longer than they had. The range had gone unnaturally quiet. Not because anyone asked for silence, but because instinct demanded it. Even the ones who had been laughing moments ago now stood still, arms folded, mouths half open, watching her through a lens of curiosity that was slowly turning into unease. She didn't notice. Her world had narrowed to three things. The rifle, her breathing, and the distant circle downrange. Everything else, voices, ego, mockery, had faded into irrelevance. She adjusted her stance by a fraction of an inch. Not because she was unsure, but because precision lived in small corrections. The buttstock pressed firmly into her shoulder, familiar and grounding. The cold metal kissed her cheek as she leaned in, eyes lining up with the iron sights. No scope, no assistance, just discipline. Her finger rested on the trigger, not squeezing, not pulling, waiting. Patience was the difference between noise and purpose. She knew that. This rifle had taught her that long ago. Behind her, someone whispered, "She's taking too long." Another replied, quieter this time, "That's not hesitation." They were right. It was control. She let out a slow breath, stopping just before the end. Her body settled into stillness, muscles relaxed but ready, like a coiled spring held perfectly in balance. For a brief moment, a memory surfaced. A different range. A colder morning. Targets that mattered more than pride. A voice from long ago echoed in her mind, not loud, never angry. "One shot. Make it count." Her finger tightened. The rifle cracked. The sound was sharp, clean, final. It wasn't the loudest shot of the day, but it carried weight. The recoil pushed back into her shoulder, solid and honest, and she absorbed it without flinching. The bolt cycled smoothly under her practiced hand as the echo rolled away across the range. Downrange, the target shuddered. For half a second, no one spoke. Then someone squinted. "Did she?" Another leaned forward, hand shielding his eyes. "Wait." The range officer looked through his spotting scope. His posture changed instantly, spine straightening, one hand lowering the scope slowly, as if confirming what his eyes had already told him. He cleared his throat. "Bullseye," he said. The word landed like a dropped weight. Dead center. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind, but the heavy, stunned kind. The kind that pressed on the chest and demanded a reevaluation of assumptions. One of the men let out a low laugh, disbelief tangled with respect. "No way." Another shook his head slowly. With that rifle, she lowered the weapon carefully, engaging the safety, setting it down with the same respect she'd shown from the start. Only then did she turn around. Their expressions had changed. No smirks, no jokes, no dismissive smiles, just surprise, and something else. Respect. The one who had said, "You'll miss, sweetheart," swallowed hard. "I didn't expect that." She met his gaze calmly. No triumph, no anger. "I know," she said simply. The range officer walked over, still glancing back at the target as if it might change its mind. "That rifle," he said, nodding toward it, "has history." "So do I," she replied. That earned a quiet chuckle from somewhere in the group, but it wasn't mocking anymore. It was acknowledgement. Someone else spoke up, genuine now. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" She considered the question. "From people who didn't laugh," she said. "And from mistakes that were expensive." They nodded, understanding more than they realized. The man who'd mocked her earlier stepped closer, hands raised slightly, not in surrender, but in humility. "I was wrong," he said. "About you. About the rifle." She inclined her head. "Happens." The target was reeled back in. Up close, the shot was undeniable, clean, centered, unforgiving. Proof, printed in paper and torn fibers. No excuses, no debate. As the group reset for the next round, something fundamental had shifted. Voices were lower now, movements more careful. The confidence remained, but it was tempered, reshaped. And she picked up the rifle again, checking it with the same quiet care. Because for her, this was never about proving them wrong. It was about honoring what she already knew to be true. And the old World War II rifle, resting solidly in her hands, seemed to agree. The silence didn't break all at once. It unraveled slowly, like tension releasing from a tightly wound cord. People shifted their weight. Someone cleared their throat. The range, which had felt frozen in that single perfect moment, gradually returned to motion, but not to what it had been before. Because something had changed. She stood calmly beside the bench, cleaning the rifle with deliberate care. A cloth passed over the metal, gentle but thorough, as if she were tending to something alive. The rifle wasn't just equipment to her, it was history, discipline, and trust forged over time. Each movement was unhurried, unconcerned, with the eyes now watching her with a very different energy. The group that had mocked her earlier lingered nearby. No one laughed anymore. No one joked. Their confidence hadn't vanished, but it had been reshaped, smoothed by humility. One of them finally spoke. "Can I see it?" She looked up, studied him for a moment, then nodded. Carefully, he accepted the rifle with both hands, as if instinctively aware that casual handling would be disrespectful. He turned it over slowly, eyes tracing the worn edges, the aged wood, the marks time had carved into it. "This thing's older than my grandfather," he murmured. "And it still does exactly what it was built to do," she replied. He handed it back with a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. Guess it's not about how new it is. She met his eyes. It never is. The range officer approached again, clipboard tucked under his arm. You shoot competition? He asked. She shook her head. Not anymore. Military. He pressed gently. She paused. Just a beat. Once. That was all she offered, and he didn't push. Some stories didn't need to be told out loud. As the next round of shooters prepared, the atmosphere felt different. People paid attention now, not just to their targets, but to their form, their breathing, their patience. A few tried to slow themselves down, mimicking the steadiness they'd witnessed. Others asked quieter questions, genuine ones. How do you keep your hands so steady? How do you know when to pull? How long did that take to learn? She answered some, not all. Her replies were simple, grounded. Practice, listening, respecting the process. No secrets, no shortcuts. When her turn came again, she didn't announce it. She simply stepped forward, took her position, and repeated the ritual. Breath, balance, focus. This time, no one mocked. They watched. The second shot landed close, not perfect like the first, but precise enough to confirm the truth. Skill wasn't luck. Consistency wasn't coincidence. A quiet murmur of appreciation rippled through the group. When she finished and stepped back, the man who had first laughed approached her again. His tone was different now, careful, sincere. I shouldn't have said what I did, he admitted. I saw the rifle, and made assumptions. She nodded. Most people do. About you, too, he added. She met his gaze, steady and calm. That's their choice. He hesitated. You could have said something. Proved us wrong before the shot. She smiled faintly. I didn't need to. As she packed up, wrapping the rifle once more in its faded cloth, she felt no triumph. No urge to savor the moment. What she felt instead was quiet satisfaction, the kind that didn't need witnesses. She slung the case over her shoulder and turned toward the exit. Behind her, the range resumed its rhythm. Shots echoed. Targets moved. Life went on. But the memory stayed. They would remember the sound of that old rifle. The way laughter died before the shot. The stillness that followed. And they would remember her, not as the woman with the rusted weapon, but as the one who reminded them that skill doesn't need approval, and respect doesn't ask permission. Outside, the sunlight was warm. She paused for a moment, breathing it in, then walked on. The rifle rested against her back, quiet and patient. It had done its job. So had she.